Добрый день.
Distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. Tatiana Dmitrievna, Tatiana Fedorovna, dear guests. It's March 14th, the year 2022, 2 p.m. Moscow time. And we are beginning the panel session for the defense of the thesis by Tatiana Dremina. The thesis is submitted for the academic degree of Candidate of Sciences in Psychology. The specialization is 536 Clinical Psychology. The topic of the thesis is psychological adaptation to pregnancy in women with different motherhood experience. Under the order issued by the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University, Alexander Gnyadov, as of January 10, 2022, number 1/1, I, Olga Shilkova, a Doctor of Sciences in Psychology, a professor, and acting head of the Department of Medical Psychology and Psychophysiology of St. Petersburg State University, was appointed the chair of the board. The order also approved the members of the board, namely Valentina Bazova, Doctor of Sciences in Psychology, Professor of the Department of General Psychology of St. Petersburg State University, Irina Gorkovaya, Doctor of Sciences in Psychology, Professor, Head of the Department of Psychosomatics and Psychotherapy of St. Petersburg State University, Pediatric Medical University, Vladimir Mendelevich, Doctor of Sciences in Medicine, Professor, Head of the Department of Psychiatry and Medical Psychology of the Kazan State Medical University. And we also have a colleague that joins us online, our member of the board, Gulchehra Ikhtiarova, Doctor of Sciences in Medicine, Professor, Head of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology of the Bukhara State Medical Institute. Gulchehra Akhmalovna, do you hear and see us? Yes, hello. So, Gulchehra Akhmalovna, am I right that you hear us, but you don't see us? No, I both see and hear you. Okay, thank you. And we also have our candidate for the degree, Tatiana Dremina, with us, and her thesis supervisor, Doctor of Sciences in Psychology, Professor, Head of the Department of General and Clinical Psychology of the Kursk State Medical University, Tatiana Vasilenko. Distinguished colleagues, in order to improve the quality of our connection, I would like to ask you, Gulchehra Akhmalovna, to turn off your microphone, but don't forget to turn it on when I give you the floor. And I would also like to inform you that the panel session of the dissertation board is being recorded and broadcast on the St. Petersburg State University website. And our board session is also interpreted from Russian into English. Currently, we have an email address posted on the page with live broadcast of the board session, and all listeners can submit their questions to Tatiana, our candidate for the degree, online. Questions regarding the thesis or the scientific discussion or the presentation of the candidate for the degree, and thus our listeners can participate in the academic discussion. These questions will be forwarded to me by our technical service, and I will read them out during the discussion. The questions must be related to this presentation and the content of the thesis, and don't forget to give your name and position if you submit a question. The questions that have nothing to do with the scientific discussion or refer to the text of the dissertation, and anonymous questions will not be voiced. Under the order on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University, approved by local regulatory acts of St. Petersburg State University, herein the order, the session of the dissertation board is valid, providing 2/3 of the appointed board members are present. 2/3 of the appointed board members are present, and the total number is not to be fewer than 4 people. Our board consists of 5 people, and everyone is with us today, including 1 member of the board working remotely. And we have a multimedia connection with her, therefore we have the quorum. Therefore, I kindly ask the member of the Department of Dissertation Board Support, the curator of our defense, Natalia, to fill out the attendance list. Our session should not last more than 2 hours, and the agenda is as follows. First comes the chairman's presentation about the documents submitted by the candidate for the degree and their conformity with the requirements. Chairman's replies to questions, if any, 5 minutes will be given for that. Then second, the candidate's presentation, providing an overview and findings of the research, 15 minutes will be given for that. Then questions to the candidate regarding the presentation, no more than 2 minutes per question. Followed by the candidate's replies to the questions, 5 minutes for all. Then external reviews, if any. Then the reports on the thesis. The board members will be taking the floor in turns to provide their reviews on the thesis and on the presentation. And the board members can also ask questions, and 10 minutes will be given to each board member. Then 7th item on our agenda is the chairman's report on the thesis, also 10 minutes for that. Then the candidate's comments about the reports on the thesis and replies to the questions, 20 minutes for all questions. Then we're going to have open discussion and open discussion speeches by those present at the defense, with a brief presentation of their positions or questions or suggestions to the candidate on the topic of the research, 2 minutes for anyone willing to participate. And if you want to participate or ask a question, don't forget to state your full name, academic rank, position, and place of work in the registration list. And don't forget to introduce yourself when I give you the floor. Then the chairman will ask the questions submitted during the broadcast via our website. And I would like to draw your attention to the fact that written questions that will take more than 10 minutes to read out will not be voiced. So try to be brief if you want to ask a question. Then the candidate's replies to the questions, followed by the presentation of the candidate's thesis supervisor. 3 minutes will be given for that. Then we may have a 5-minute discussion before the open balloting on conferring or non-conferring the academic degree. The discussion of the results of the defense is not broadcast. Then we're going to have open balloting. Afterwards, we're going to count the votes and record the results into the protocol. Then we're going to make a decision on whether to confer the academic degree to Tatiana or not. And finally, we're going to listen to the candidate's closing speech. So, distinguished colleagues, any questions or objections about our agenda? None. Okay, thank you. No objections, therefore, let us start our session. First of all, I would like to ask you to switch off the sound on your mobile phones. And distinguished Ultikra Akmalovna, who joins us online, I kindly ask you not to switch off your mobile phones in order to allow us to get in touch with you if there is any technical failure. So, let's start. The chairman's brief presentation. A thesis by Tatiana Dremina for the academic degree of Candidate of Sciences in Psychology, specialization 536 Clinical Psychology, is titled Psychological Adaptation to Pregnancy in Women with Different Motherhood Experience. The thesis was approved for the defense by the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University, issued on December 20th, 2021, number 12306/1. Tatiana Dremina has prepared her thesis to the Kursk State Medical University as a postgraduate student, and Tatiana Vasilenko, Doctor of Sciences in Psychology, Professor, Head of the Department of General and Clinical Psychology at the Kursk State Medical University, is the thesis supervisor. 5 published works describe the research findings, and there are 4 publications published in journals recommended by the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation, and 1 article published in journals indexed in Web of Science and Scopus. All the documents submitted by the candidate for the degree comply with the requirements of St. Petersburg State University, and they are kept in the certification file of the applicant. The curator of the defense, member of the Department of Dissertation Board Support, has all the copies of these documents. And before I give the floor to our candidate for the degree, I would like to ask the members of the board, distinguished members of the board, do you have any general questions to our applicant? Is they need to consider the whole list of documents submitted by the candidate for the degree? Thus, Tatiana, you have the floor, and you can start your report. Distinguished chair and distinguished members of the board, thank you very much for the opportunity to deliver my report today. And I'm going to talk about my thesis dedicated to psychological adaptation to pregnancy by women with a different motherhood experience. Strengthening health is a priority field of the state policy of the Russian Federation, and particular attention should be given to reproductive health and maternity overall. Based on theoretical and methodological analysis of subjectivity, situational approach, and the approach to studying adaptation and the concept of motherhood, we made a provision that adaptation can define readiness to motherhood. And in our work, we considered adaptation not just as taking the conditions of the current situation, but also as the activity of subject aimed at the change of the situation that violated the equilibrium. And the result of adaptation is the establishment of reaction to the change of conditions and the development of strategies of behavior that optimize the life of women and maintain the integrity of personality. And adaptation to pregnancy dwells upon the understanding of the new body experience, social status, personal identity, the formation of readiness to motherhood, and it helps to establish the maternal role. Psychological studies dedicated to psychological adaptation of women in pregnancy are still lacking, therefore. The approaches to diagnostic, correction, prevention of maladaptation require some amendments, and this is important to develop theory and practice of prenatal clinical psychology. Our study considers pregnancy as a unique life situation and motherhood experience impacts it. It can be represented by the presence of one healthy child and ordinary course of pregnancy, that's positive experience, and also an experience of miscarriage, that's a negative experience, and lack of experience when the woman expects her first child. And this motherhood experience is a factor of psychological adaptation to pregnancy that defines the type of attitude to pregnancy. The goal and the goals are given here on the slide, as well as the object of study. And the object of study is psychological adaptation of women to pregnancy, and the subject of study is the characteristics of psychological adaptation to pregnancy at the level of life, subject, social, sense, and personal levels, interaction of psychological characteristics of adaptation to pregnancy and the experience of motherhood, presence or of positive or negative experience or absence of experience. And we formed the basic hypothesis that peculiarities of psychological adaptation to pregnancy depend on the experience of motherhood. And in order to achieve our goals, we prepared the following specific hypothesis. The experience of motherhood impacts the living through the situation of pregnancy and defines the process of psychological adaptation. The presence of negative experience may lead to a maladaptive type of attitude to pregnancy, and lack of experience hinders adaptation. Inclusion criteria given here on the slide. And the unified criterion for inclusion is the term of pregnancy. We had pregnant women in the second and in the third trimester, high level of satisfaction with marriage, lack of abortions and pregnancy pathologies, and for women with absence of experience, the state of first pregnancy, lack of negative pregnancy experience. Women are aged from 28 to 32 years. And as for women with positive experience, they should have one child, the age from 28 to 32. And they should lack negative experience. And for women with negative experience, they should have a miscarriage experience, one miscarriage. They are aged from 22 to 27. Overall, we had 159 participants in this research that had no claims on the health. And the control group was made up of 63 women that expect their first child. The first experimental group consisted of 57 women that expected the second child, and the third experimental group was made up of 39 women with miscarriage experience. And those were the women that received checkups at maternity hospitals of Kursk. And the stages of the study are given here on the slide, and the sampling of participants was carried out at the antenatal clinic. We assessed the status of pregnant women and the presence. The women were mostly there due to the forthcoming delivery. Then we carried out statistic analysis of the obtained results. And as for the psychological study, it included the application of clinical, experimental psychological study methods as well as psychodiagnostic methods given here on the slide. Before the start of the work, along with gynecologist obstetrician, we analyzed the case records for women in order to exclude the women that had an experience of abortions and pregnancy pathologies. For the statistical analysis, we've chosen the methods of descriptive, comparative statistic, correlation analysis, and multinomial and multiple logistical regression analysis. And the results were considered valid if the first degree mistake was equal or less than 0.5, and we used a StatSoft Statistica package. Based on the analysis of the sources, we carried out the empirical model according to the criteria of psychological adaptation to pregnancy. In our study, we believe that as for the criteria of psychological adaptation, there are as follows: accepting of the role of mother that leads to the change in social roles, and the dominating role is mother's role. Positive value of the child, positive attitude to pregnancy, and also sense of life, and positive assessment of the current state of living in current moment in life. So, considering the context and the subjective picture, we see the difference of sense based on the character of events. There are general topics for all groups, but there is a distribution, some kind of distribution in other fields. The most vulnerable group is the group of women with negative pregnancy experience. Their context is represented by the events of in their family and existential problems, and they include a negative experience of pregnancy, and it reduces the positive charge for women, the positive understanding. And these women are less oriented to the future, and they are mostly focused on the past, negative past. And as for women with positive experience, they are mostly focused on the events in their family. They have positive experience of motherhood, and it increases the value of current pregnancy, and they have a huge emotional charge, positive charge. And also we analyze the type of readiness to maternity depending on motherhood experience. And in women who expect the first and the second child, the readiness is represented mostly by adequate and anxious. And as for women with negative experience, the adequate attitude is reduced and the anxious type has increased. And women that lack experience, they still have adequate roles associated with their first family, and women with positive experience, they associate themselves with the second family, the role of mother and the role of wife. And also they have a dependency on positive motherhood experience in their own families and on the performed maternal functions. And as for the difference, they were found when we analyzed the bodily experience of these women, the physical experience. Women with positive experience are characterized by high indicators of understanding, life comprehension. Women with first-time experience, they have a have an ongoing rethinking process. They rethink their position. And women with miscarriages, they try to control the pregnancy process. And as for the value aspect of pregnancy, we found differences in pregnant women with lack of experience and the presence of positive experience. They had spiritual satisfaction that was prevailing, and according to our goals we studied the level of internality. And here we see the mid-level of internality in women with positive experience and lack of experience, and as for miscarriage group, they had a high level of internality. And women with positive experience and lack of experience, their average reflection level is smaller than in women with negative experience. And it means that women with negative experience did not treat their trauma, and it blocked processes at the level of egocentrism. We found that women with positive experience have the prevalence of low level of egocentrism, and women with miscarriages had high levels of anxiety here. And here you see the correlation of adaptation to pregnancy. Correlation analysis demonstrate the sense connection with sense level as a locus of subjective control, and we see the demonstrations of emotions here, and we consider the contribution of each of these factors to the general adaptation process depending on the motherhood experience. We conducted regression analysis here, and as criterion variables detected by correlation analysis, we had understanding of life, reflectivity, and locus of subjective control. We used multiple regression analysis to demonstrate that adaptation process, depending on motherhood experience, is represented by the criteria we outlined with different value. And understanding of life contributes greatly to the understanding of completely opposite groups. First, we have reflection processes in positive experience, and understanding of life and the level of subjective control impacts the negative group, and we lack experience. That's mostly emotional assessment of pregnancy as an important event in the life journey of women. Using a multinomial regression analysis, we found interaction of dominating social role, the experience of motherhood, and readiness to motherhood. Based on the results of study, we we formulated a model of adaptation in women with different levels of experience, and we see that most optimal option is with women with positive experience, and the most complicated adaptation is in women with negative experience. And when women are pregnant with a first child, first of all, they need to adapt with the fact that they become mothers. And that depends. Also, let's consider the type of readiness to maternity. We saw these maladaptive trends in every group, and regardless of the prevalence of maladaptive trends in a group with negative experience, such as mix, shift of social roles, shift of control locus, trauma, here anxious type reduces the value of pregnancy, and when we have positive experience and a lot of adaptive trends, ignoring adaptation type reduces the value of the child for women. And also we detected combined activities of criteria of psychological adaptation, the type of readiness, and the experience of motherhood, and therefore we developed a maladaptive forecast model for women depending on their pregnancy experience. And therefore our idea is approved because women with positive experience mostly adapt successfully to pregnancy, unlike women with lack of experience and women with a negative experience. So let's shift to the conclusions. Different experience of motherhood define the adaptation process in the second and third trimesters. The peculiarities of psychological adaptation to pregnancy include the changes at the level of subject, individual, personal levels, and the group of women with lack of experience is characterized by restructuring of the sense sector, by anxiety that is associated with the formation of value attitude to the child. And in this group we see the prevalence of adequate and anxious type of readiness to maternity, and this is associated with difficulties in mastering the new role. As for women with positive experience, they are characterized by high level of understanding of life, and pregnancy is the main focus in the hierarchy of sense, and they mostly have adequate type of readiness to motherhood, and it demonstrates that they understand this role of mother. And as for women with a negative experience, we saw low levels of understanding of life and increased value of the child, and they focus mostly on their state, and it is associated with fears and inadequate reactions due to the cause of pregnancy. They have activization of negative experience of pregnancy, and this group is mostly focused on the past events, and they mostly have ignoring and anxious type of readiness to motherhood, and it means that they don't see themselves as mothers due to the past trauma that they had, the feeling of guilt and recollections that hurt them. Therefore, we developed a program of adaptation for such women. Thank you. Thank you, Tatiana. Distinguished members of the board. Any questions on the thesis, on the presentation? Yes, may I? Regardless of the fact that I studied the thesis carefully, I now have questions. Could you please tell me, among you women, did you have those that had a negative experience of IVF? No, none. IVF was not considered, but in criteria of inclusion exclusion you did not include them. So theoretically they may be there. No, we analyzed the clinical records of women with obstetricians, gynecologists, so we didn't find these women. And then defining the definition of whether this pregnancy was expected or not. Did you consider it? I just saw the satisfaction with marriage. Yes, we considered satisfaction with marriage. And the desire to have a child was not considered. Yes. Vladimir, are you satisfied? Yes? Okay, thank you. Other questions, if any? No? Okay, if no, let us give the floor to our members of the board who will deliver their reviews and assessments. And And if we get any additional reports, we'll read them out as well. So, Tatiana, I believe that you should answer questions after every review. Yes, the questions that each review contains. Okay, thank you. So, distinguished colleagues, I announce the first technical break. Before we restore the connection with our colleague from the Bukhara Institute.
Gulchikra.
So, we continue our session. The first technical break is over, and as I've already mentioned, we shift to the reports of the members of the board. And I should mention that due to the fact that the reviews were already published on the St. Petersburg State University website, in order to allow everyone to get acquainted with them, the members of the board can voice just the basic ideas and criticisms and questions. And in any case, we have 10 minutes each. And as we had such technical problems, consulting other members of the board, I offered to first of all give the floor to our colleague that is working remotely, Gulchikra Akmalovna Ikhtiarova. Please, you have the floor. Thank you so much for giving me the floor. Thank you so much for the invitation to the board session. And I would like to deliver my report on the work of Tatiana about psychological adaptation to pregnancy in women with different motherhood experience. I won't dwell upon the relevance because the author has already reported on that, but I wanted to say that indeed psychological adaptation to pregnancy in women is the most relevant topic, because all pregnant women today, especially after the pandemic and in post-pandemic period, they all suffered psychologically, and I believe that from the point of view of biology and psychology, this topic is quite relevant. And if we talk about the goals of the study, they are quite important, and they associate certainly women have both positive and negative experience, and they may lack experience, and surely we can't say straight away what adaptation mechanisms they have. Therefore, the author conducted not just theoretical but also conceptual analysis of factors of psychological adaptation to pregnancy, and using multinomial and multidimensional regression analysis method, she defined the criteria of adaptation for groups with different experience, and the author also devised a forecast model of maladaptation to pregnancy, and she developed sociological support programs for such women. I cannot but mention that this topic is quite novel and quite relevant, and once again the experience of women is quite varied, and I would like to emphasize the in-depth analysis that the author conducted, which obtained the results. She used a correlation and regression analysis of the results as well. Now I beg your pardon, do you hear me? Distinguished colleagues, unfortunately, yet another technical problem. So I announce the second technical break. So the second technical break is over. No, we don't see you, but we hear you quite well. But I still ask you to repeat this last 2 or 3 sentences because we overheard them. Well, I mentioned the novelty and the fact that based on empirical analysis of the pregnant women, the author established the process of adaptation and readiness to pregnancy. And they also describe the factors that define the adaptation process to pregnancy, the criteria of pregnancy adaptation based on the existing motherhood experience. And as a result of the conducted study, the author found that women with a positive experience have more success in adaptation to pregnancy, unlike pregnant women with lack of experience and women with a negative experience. That's why if the author continues to study, if the author continues her study and will develop preparation programs, I believe women will adapt even more to pregnancy and will adapt better to pregnancy compared to women that never got this psychological counseling. And as for the value of these results, they make a great contribution. Do you hear me? Yes, yes. Yes, at least we hear you quite well. Yes, okay. So depending on the type of psychological adaptation and the type of pregnancy readiness, and the conducted analysis of foreign and domestic works dedicated to adaptation and to physical experience and to models of adaptation were used to develop this program, to expand the understanding of this program and to better understand the psychological adaptation modes to pregnancy. And the practical value is demonstrated by the practical valuable data that allowed us to define the major factors that define the adaptation process to pregnancy. The author also carried out the analysis of clinical psychological adaptation aspects and she developed the program of clinical psychological support of women in aimed at the prevention of maladaptive type of adaptation. And based on these results, the author offered options to prevent maladaptation to pregnancy that can be used in practical work. And as for the structure of the thesis, so in Uzbekistan, PhD work should have 120 pages, and the author has 175 pages, and so that's a finished PhD study. Whereas in Uzbekistan, it should not exceed 150 pages, but I'm not sure, maybe this volume is allowed in Russia. But still, that's a finished study. The results are published in 4 peer-reviewed journals recommended by the Higher Attestation Commission and the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation. And in a foreign journal, I saw one publication in a foreign journal, Scopus journal, and the list of sources includes 256 sources, including 59 foreign sources. The structure is logical, and everything is documented according to the standard. So that's a finished study at a high professional level. Therefore, I have a positive experience. But still, I had several questions that I wanted to ask. And if you do not mind, I want to ask them. First of all, what were the outcomes of these pregnant women, and was there a connection with some obstetric complications in pregnancy with psychological adaptation of women in case of pregnancy? Because it was your goal, and it would be interesting to understand how your women reacted to different complications. That's the first question. And the second question, what's the medical and economic efficiency? Because for every work, we also consider economic efficiency as well. Thank you so much. So these are the 2 questions that I wanted to ask. And I give you some time to answer, and after that I'm going to read out the conclusion. So, Gulchikra, you first of all want to get the answers, yes, and then read this conclusion. Yes. Yeah, if it's possible. First of all, I wanted to get answers to my questions, and then I'm going to read the conclusion. Okay. Tatiana? Tatiana, please. Distinguished Gulchikra Akhmalovna, thank you very much for the question. All the women delivered healthy babies, and by the way, it would be interesting to trace not just the outcome of pregnancy, but also the process of delivery and the presence of obstetric complications, but unfortunately we did not control the process. That's the answer to the first question. And the second question. This range of studies according to which the somatic state of child directly depends on the peculiarities of psychological adaptation of the mother to pregnancy and the understanding of the role of mother. For example, these are such studies like the studies of Mohamed Rahimov and the framework of concept of child development. So they say that mother and child form a unified interaction system, psychological interaction system, and its function depends on the individual peculiarities of partners, and psychological development of the child is carried out in proper, considering the proper changes of mother. And also Simonenko and Muravyova wrote about the reduction of the risk of the development of somatic diseases in newborns in case when mothers perceive this motherhood role successfully. Gulchikra, are you satisfied with the answers? Yes, I am. And I wanted to say that my remarks critical remarks do not compromise the overall high mark of this work. And in conclusion, I would like to say that the thesis by Tatiana Dremina, entitled Psychological Adaptation to Pregnancy in Women with Different Motherhood Experience, meets the requirements of the order as of November 19th, 2021, on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University, and Ms. Dremina deserves the academic degree. I beg your pardon, once again, that's a very important part. So I announce the third technical break. So go to the conclusion once again. Do you hear me? We do. A thesis by Tatiana Dremina, titled Psychological Adaptation to Pregnancy in all women with different motherhood experience, meets the requirements of the order as of November 19th, 2021, on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And Ms. Dremina deserves the academic degree of Candidate of Sciences in Psychology in Specialization 536, Clinical Psychology. And Articles 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order are not violated. Thank you so much, Kulchukra Akmalovna. Thank you so much for taking part in the work of the board. And we ask you to stay in touch, because we're going to vote after all the board members deliver their reviews. And now I would like to give the floor to other members of the board. Valentina Bazova, please. You have the floor. As for the relevance of this topic, it is not questioned, because the study of psychological adaptation of pregnant women up until now is insufficient, and the correction program and prevention of maladaptation require additional developments. and methodological substantiation of the study provided a comprehensive approach that reflects this study, the goals of this study. And as for the scientific novelty of results, it is the author specified the adaptation process, and she proved the connection between the process of adaptation and readiness to motherhood. And for the first time in clinical psychology, the author describes the factors that define the process of adaptation to pregnancy. And for the first time, she defined and studied the criteria of adaptation based on the motherhood experience that women had. And she also offered and statistically substantiated the model, forecasting model of disadaptive attitude to pregnancy, considering the pregnancy experience. And the defense provisions reflect the study process. The validity level of the results is based on specific methodological and theoretical provisions, on in-depth analysis of results obtained using the random sampling of participants using the mathematical statistics method. And she also defined a forecast model of maladaptive behavior in pregnant women depending on the pregnancy and motherhood experience of women. And she also provided psychological counseling program and adaptation program for pregnant women. Overall, the assessment, my opinion, is as follows. The present work demonstrates that different motherhood experience defines the adaptation process to pregnancy. And it is emphasized that pregnant women that lack motherhood experience need to readapt their conceptual basis to adapt to the anxiety associated with the development of value attitude to the child. And women with positive motherhood experience are characterized by high level of understanding of life, and women with a negative motherhood experience are characterized by low levels of life understanding, by fears, by the prevalence of anxiety, the feeling of remorse and fears for the course of pregnancy, and they're mostly focused on the past, and it's hard for them to adapt to the role of the mother. And they also define the dominating criteria of adaptation for every group of women. Motherhood experience in the context of life, time, is of paramount importance if we talk about the adaptation, and they focus on the adaptive type. A lack of pregnancy or a negative experience, they provoke maladaptation. Thus, the thesis by Tatiana Fedorovna Dremina is a finished study, and it is documented according to the present rules. And the basic results are presented in 5 academic works in 5 journals, 4 recommended by the Higher Attestation Commission and 1 Scopus journal. And the author demonstrates good knowledge of contemporary works. She had 259 sources, and 112 are domestic ones and 59 are foreign ones. And let me dwell upon the questions that I had and criticisms that I had. First of all, there is a bit of excess in your methods of study. I believe you could do with a smaller number. A second question: what are the most important factors of maladaptive type of attitude to pregnancy? And the third question that I wanted to ask: what should we foresee in the psychological adaptation of young and older women? And the conclusion is as follows. The thesis by Tatiana Dremina, titled Psychological Adaptation to Pregnancy in Women with Different Motherhood Experience, meets the requirements of the order as of November 19, 2021. Number 11181/1 on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And Ms. Dremina, applicant for the degree, deserves the academic degree of Candidate of Sciences in Psychology and Specialization 536, Clinical Psychology. And Articles 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order are not violated. And that's my review. So, please, you can answer. Thank you very much. Valentina, Tatiana, please, you can answer. Thank you so much for the attention to my work. And first of all, as for the first question, this decision was associated with detailed study of psychological adaptation to pregnancy according to the criteria that we outlined that are found at the level of subject of life, social level, sense, and personal level. Thank you very much for this comment. As for the factors of maladaptation to pregnancy, as our results showed, readiness to pregnancy can be a kind of maladaptive factor as well. And as for the third question, the experience of motherhood, the first or the following pregnancy, plays an important role in psychological preparation of women, and also the experience of pathology of pregnancy, the presence of abortions or miscarriages, and if pregnant women are young and expect their first child, we should provide some preparation to the role of the mother, and the inclusion of this mother's role to the system of social roles, and also the work with anxiety should be carried out. And as for women that have a negative experience, we should work with emotional sphere, with overcoming and treatment of trauma associated with pregnancy loss. Thank you. Thank you. Valentina, are you satisfied with the answers? Yes, I am. Okay, now I would like to give the floor to Professor Горьковая. Please, you have the floor. Distinguished colleagues, Tatiana, I won't dwell upon the relevance. You already mentioned it. It's not questioned at all. I would like to dwell upon the academic novelty. So it's based on the fact that for the first time the author studied the criteria of psychological adaptation to pregnancy, namely the understanding of the role of mother, the change of the system of social roles, the presence of value of child, and the sense or understanding the life journey, the assessment of emotional attitude, and the locus of subjective control. And for the first time it was proven that dominating criteria of adaptation in pregnant women with positive experience are the criteria of all levels that were studied. And for women with a negative experience, the criteria of subjective life, social, and personal levels of experience are important. And for women with lack of experience, criteria of social and personal level are most important. For the first time, the author proved that the major factors that define the adaptive and maladaptive type to pregnancy are positive and negative experience of motherhood and readiness to motherhood. And for the first time, the author offered the model to forecast maladaptation to pregnancy depending on motherhood experience based on the following components: subject of life, social level, and value sense level. And as for the credibility and validity of conclusions, it was already mentioned, extensive empirical material for each of three groups. Mathematical processing results that corresponds to the goals. And as for the importance of these results, well, theoretical importance is demonstrated by the credible data about basic criteria to adaptation in women with positive and negative experience and lack of experience, and this expands our understanding of psychology of pregnant women within the framework of clinical psychology. And practical value is also important. That's the testing of this block of study. And she also offered the academic model of forecasting maladaptation to pregnancy. And for me, that's the most valuable result for this work. And also the program of support was developed to pregnancy situation. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that this data can be used in academic courses for clinical psychology. Basic characteristics of publications, well, it was already mentioned, therefore I won't dwell upon that. And I would like to mention the questions. I had a range of questions that I wanted to ask. First of all, could you specify whether your major and specific hypotheses were proven? Second question, what was the term of pregnancy in case of miscarriage? Was it a single case or multiple miscarriages? Third question, could you please comment on the following phrase that you had on page number 19 of the presentation? Inadequate and ignoring type of readiness to motherhood, the value of the child is not represented in describing the value and sense level in the model of forecasting of maladaptation to pregnancy depending on motherhood experience. Why is child not valuable in this model? And what's the efficiency of the proposed model, the proposed program of clinical and psychological adaptation of women to pregnancy? And the last question, could you please develop on the principles of prevention of maladaptation outlined in your goals? And these questions are not of paramount importance, and they do not compromise the overall high value of this work. And in conclusion, I would like to say, and this is by Tatiana and Dremina, titled Psychological Adaptation to Pregnancy in Women with Different Motherhood Experience, meets the requirements of the order as of November 19, 2021, number 11181/1, on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University, and Ms. Dremina deserves the academic degree of Candidate of Sciences in Psychology and Specialization 536, Clinical Psychology. And Articles 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order are not violated. So you can answer the questions. Okay, thank you, Irina. So, good crowd, we were ready to announce the technical break, but finally I see that you're here as well, so we continue. And I kindly ask you to stay because we're going to vote later on. Yes, first of all, thank you very much for the questions. The results of conducted study demonstrate the confirmation of the hypothesis proposed. Indeed, a different motherhood experience define the process of adaptation to pregnancy at trimesters 2 to 3. The detected correlations between components of psychological adaptation to pregnancy are proof of our idea that the process of adaptation to pregnancy is associated with changes in emotional, reflexive processes, sense formation, and temporal relations. And our idea on the impact of experience of motherhood on the perception of the situation of pregnancy is also proved by the following fact that pregnant women with positive experience more successfully adapt to pregnancy than women with lack or negative experience. and women with a negative experience characterized by a shift of social roles, mixed locus of subjective control, untreated trauma associated with pregnancy loss, and women pregnant for the first time aggravate. In the group of women that are pregnant for the first time, we see the aggravation of maladaptation and ignoring type of readiness to pregnancy, and we see the high level of internality here. And as for the second question, the second experimental group was made up of 39 women in third trimester with an experience of miscarriage. And miscarriage happened once in these women during the first trimester from the first to week to week 13. And as for the adequate and ignoring type of readiness to maternity and the value of a child that is not represented in this group. This idea is associated with the fact that even with the adequate type, we saw maladaptive trends, and when this value of pregnancy is pronounced in a group with positive experience, the positive aspect shifts from the child to other spheres like upbringing or motherhood functions. As for the efficiency of the proposed program, we did not conduct special study on the assessment of the efficiency of the program, but along with that, since 2020, the program was introduced to the work of social psychological counseling service of the antenatal center of the Kursk region. The fifth question, based on our empirical results for the group of pregnant women that had negative experience, the prevention of maladaptation to pregnancy is aimed at the reduction of the level of anxiety and tension, on the adaptation of the role of mother, on the development of and treatment of psychological problems, the treatment of trauma that is associated with feeling of remorse, and we work on the expansion of the perspective of the future for women with lack of experience. Psychocorrection work also is peculiar. We need to increase the accessibility of psychological counseling on psychophysiological peculiarities of the course of pregnancy and delivery process. For these women, we outline the following targets of psychological counseling: understanding of the new state, pregnancy, then transformation of structure of social roles, then understanding the role of mother, then the establishment of a positive emotional attitude to pregnancy, then the development of sense and value of motherhood, and the reduction of psychological tension. And for women with a positive experience, major fields of work were psychological correction of individual peculiarities, and also the work on treatment of unresolved problems. And also we should pay attention to women with ignoring and anxious type of readiness to motherhood in order to increase the value of child in pregnant women. Mostly we had requests for harmonization of relations of the existing child and the child that was due. So, Irina, are you satisfied with the answers? Yes, I am. Okay. Now I would like to give the floor to Professor Mendelevich. Okay, thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. Tatiana. I won't dwell upon the technical aspects of my review because it was documented according to the requirements of the Higher Attestation Commission, and everyone, I believe, read it already. Therefore, I just wanted to dwell upon the topic and about the prospects of the development of this topic. It seems to me that Tatiana Fedorovna, with her supervisor, decided to take up on this very important field that can analyze the range of factors that influence the psychological adaptation to pregnancy. They've taken just one small aspect, to my mind, and if we consider all the factors, then that's not a PhD thesis. We need to establish the whole team of researchers. When we talk about adaptation, we should also bear in mind that it's not just the personality that adapts, it also analyzes the situation, and the pregnancy situation can be completely different for every woman. For example, we may have a normal pregnancy course, we may have a pathological pregnancy. for example, with histosis and toxic high levels of toxicity. And in this case, adaptation will be completely different. We won't say that adaptation to a pathological pregnancy will be just the same. The factors that are outlined, locus of self-control and others, readiness to motherhood and so on, they won't play a role in case if this factor is not taken into account. So you did not mention these factors, and I understand why, because they were not included in the goals. But still, I believe that's an important aspect that requires further development. I beg your pardon that I want to refer to the works that we prepared, our department prepared. We were working with IVF, with psychological state, and we studied that psychological condition may be associated with lack of pregnancy, with this unexplained infertility, and this diagnosis is frequently used. And psychosomatic factors, they have played an important role. And the major aspect here, major emphasis is made not on psychosomatic aspects, but on other adaptation aspects. And just for the future, I believe it would be interesting to consider the whole range of all possible aspects here. And above all, state of psyche, pre-morbid. We can't say pre-morbid because that's not, pregnancy is not morbidity. So pre-pregnancy characteristics, peculiarities of psychopathology, for example, that may have caused maladaptation. This factor is left behind, and I understand that's not a criticism. That's just mentioned to understand that you can't cover everything. And I asked a question on the desired or undesired pregnancy, and I believe that's an important question because regardless of the fact that women were satisfied with their family relations, still this fact of undesired or desired pregnancy will impact the state of adaptation. One question that I already asked, I have already got the answer. And the second question is the one that solicits your opinion on the fact that, on the following fact, could it happen that these are not just personal peculiarities or personal understanding, but also negative or positive experience of pregnancy in mother or in sisters or in close friends? Maybe this experience could be associated with the level of adaptation in pregnant women. And the conclusion is that this is by Tatiana and Dremina, titled Psychological Adaptation to Pregnancy by Women in Different with different motherhood experience meets the requirements of the order on the procedure of granting academic degrees in St. Petersburg State University. Ms. Dremina deserves the academic degree of Candidate of Sciences in Psychology in specialization clinical psychology, and Articles 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order are not violated. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vladimir Davidovich, for a wonderful speech, as always. So, Tatiana, you can answer. Thank you very much for the question. I also agree with it, and the experience of motherhood plays an important role, as well as the experience of her close friends and relatives, and that is particularly important for women with lack of pregnancy experience. So, distinguished colleagues, now it's my turn. And I would like to emphasize, I wanted to dwell upon the relevance, but I already see it, because to my mind that's an important study. It is aimed at scientific substantiation of psychological support for pregnancy, because that's a very delicate period in the life of women. Along with that, that's a comprehensive and contemporary study because it's based on biosociological approach, and it understands the importance of health of people, and is based on prenatal personality, physical and psychosomatic psychology, so that is reflected in the text. Unlike other psychological studies of pregnant women, Tatiana's study considers pregnancy as a special life situation and a special physical experience in complex and emotional and sense values defined by the experience of previous pregnancies or lack of it. And the study focuses on the psychological adaptation of women to the present pregnancy and all-round study of this adaptation, considering the experience of previous motherhood. This approach and this design of study benefit this work and make it personality-centered for clinical psychology, and it opens way for individualized psychological help to pregnant women. And it should be mentioned once again that the research has not just theoretical but practical value as well, because it aimed to optimize medical and psychological support of pregnant women, and the final goal here is the improvement of the demographic situation in the Russian Federation. Then I described the goal, objects of study, and I mentioned that the goal is completely met, and the main hypothesis was proven on the dependence of psychological adaptation on motherhood experience. And to implement the goals and objects of the study, the author devised a very in-depth program of study that consists of 15 methods, and it also includes social, sense, personality levels of adaptation, and others. Therefore, the study program that can be seen a bit excess, still it is methodologically proven. Each object was not included by chance. It is relevant to some aspects of psychological adaptation for pregnant women. And we see the specific representation of inclusion or exclusion criteria. The overall sampling is 159 women divided into comparable groups. The mathematical set of is also used here, so that all makes the results credible. As for scientific novelty and importance, here we can mention that based on the analysis of classical and contemporary domestic and foreign literature, we see the in-depth development of psychological adaptation as a process and active adaptation result to contemporary reality. And the key idea here is that adaptation to a specific life situation should be analyzed in the context of the life's path and life journey of the woman. And within the framework of several theoretical approaches, the author considered the peculiarities of psychological adaptation to the physical experience. And the combination of in-depth analysis of theoretical and empirical work in psychological adaptation and pregnancy psychology allowed the author to detect adaptive and maladaptive types of adaptation, and that's what makes this work special. And the author also outlined accurate criteria for each of them. And these types are based on a combination of characteristics regarding different levels of psyche organization, the level of subject of life, social level, cognitive and personal level. And I agree with Vladimir Davidovich that maybe we lack the overall organism level, but still. In the empirical study, for the first time we see the establishment of the complex of factors that define the level of psychological adaptation to pregnancy based on the differentiated approach and to analysis and the adaptation of components and levels. And for the first time we see the proof of association of psychological adaptation with the level with experience of motherhood in women with positive and negative experience. And also there is a high theoretical value for the model that you constructed, that you validated and statistically verified. So that's indeed a contribution to clinical psychology as science. And in chapter 4, the discussion of results of the study and the combination of the obtained data is analyzed in the context of global literature, and this analysis poses an independent value, and as Irina mentioned, it can be used in the teaching process. The practical value was already mentioned. The program that he devised is working, it is introduced, and that's a ready-made instrument of psychological prevention. And what I wanted to emphasize is that the program has such an advantage. It provides not just for the correction of maladaptation to pregnancy, but also for mobilization of individual and social resources that would allow to cope with different difficulties that may emerge in the pregnancy course. And once again, I would like to emphasize that that's a ready-made instrument. And as for the structure, I won't dwell upon it. This thesis is also a finished work. It is documented quite well. It is written with a good Russian academic language, so I have no significant criticisms here. I have just some wishes for the future. This introduction section, titled "The Level of Development of the Topic of Study," is not sufficient from the point of view of analysis of state-of-the-art sources of domestic and foreign literature. And it is a bit excessive when you mention classical works in transformation of personality based on psychological and somatic diseases. I understand what you meant. You wanted to emphasize the psychosomatic connection, but we're talking about pregnant women, not just sick women. So maybe you could have paid more attention to the review of foreign literature there. And also the clinical examples from every group of women with different experience of motherhood, and also vivid examples of maladaptive behavior and adaptive attitude to pregnancy. I believe they could be illustrated, and this would even make the practical value higher from the pedagogical point of view, for the students. Thus, I want to conclude that the thesis by Tatiana Dremina, titled "Psychological Adaptation to Pregnancy in Women with Different Motherhood Experience," meets the requirements of the orders of November 19, 2021 on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University, and Ms. Dremina deserves the academic degree of candidate of sciences in psychology in specialization 536, clinical psychology. Articles 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order are not violated. So please. Thank you very much, Olga Yurievna. I agree with your remarks, and I will bear them in mind for the future work. Thank you. Natalia, did we get any additional reviews? No, none. Okay. And questions? No questions as well. Okay. Maybe anyone wants to say a few words? No one? Okay. Now I'm pleased to give the floor to Tatiana Dmitrievna Vasilenko, Thesis Supervisor. Tatiana Dmitrievna, I beg your pardon, dear colleagues. I have to announce the 4th technical break because we need to restore communication with colleague. So please, Tatiana, dear chair of the board, dear members of the board, Tatiana Dremina studied at Clinical Psychology Department of the Kursk State Medical University, and then she joined the PhD course. And I want to say that Tatiana has an independent approach. She is very diligent, and she demonstrated the opportunity to carry out the scientific research, and it allowed her to raise such an important question associated with the reproductive health of women, this problem of adaptation to pregnancy. And I want to mention such a quality of Tatiana as the ability to establish contact. That's quite a hard task when women are pregnant, especially if women are already in hospital. It's hard to establish contact and to carry out such in-depth study program, and Tatiana mentioned to do that. And as for the personal peculiarities, I want to mention that she's responsible, she's well organized, she has a high level of planning skill. She planned her of studies, and she is now Deputy Director of International Medical Institute of the Kursk State Medical University, and she works directly with foreign students. And when she prepared her thesis, she helped Tanzania students who managed to cross the border independently, and she organized and directly participated in the support of these students. So her psychological competence is applied not just in science, but also in practice, in her practical activities. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, distinguished colleagues. Is anyone willing to say anything? If no, then before we draw the conclusions and vote, finally I would like to ask all the members of the board and the applicant for the degree if there are any questions on the procedure, of including the ones associated with remote access. None. Okay, no critical remarks, just the technical ones. Okay. Because that's Bukhara, Uzbekistan, certainly that's rather far. Okay. So we heard the opinion of Volchikra Akmalovna. So let's shift to the vote then. And And yet another question to the members of the board, distinguished colleagues. Before we start the vote, we have a chance to announce a technical break and to discuss everything in private. Do we need such a break to discuss the results of the defense or no? I believe no. No need for that. Yes, no need for that. Yes, no need. Okay, I think so as well. And I don't hear what Kulchikra says, but I believe she agrees with us. Okay. So no need for the break to discuss the results. So let us shift to the vote. And I'm going to solicit your opinions on the issue personally and publicly. Now it's 3:30, and we start the vote. So I raise a question on the award of the academic degree of candidate of sciences in psychology in specialization 536 clinical psychology to Tatiana Dremina. Now we're going to have an open balloting. I would like to emphasize that voting for the award of the academic degree, each member of the board agrees that Article 11 of the order is not violated by the candidate. And I would like to quote it. That's Article 11 of the order. In the thesis, the applicant for an academic degree is obliged to cite the author and/or the source of the materials or individual results borrowed, using the results obtained by the applicant personally or in co-authorship. The applicant for the degree is obliged to note this circumstance in the thesis. And let me remind you that according to section 23 of the order, the decision of the dissertation board is valid provided more than half of the board members voted in favor and not fewer than 3 people. That is why I would like to ask Gulchikra Ikhtiarova, first of all, Professor Ikhtiarova, what's your opinion? Do you support this dissertation? Yes, I support this work. Yes, I vote for the award of the academic degree. Okay, thank you so much. We heard you. Now, Valentina Bazova. I also vote for the award of the academic degree. Okay. Professor Virkovaya. I also vote for the award of the academic degree. Vladimir? Yes, I also vote for. And I also vote for the award of the academic degree. So counting the votes, the vote is quite simple. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to announce that out of the 5 members of the board, 5 voted in favor of this dissertation. No one voted against the award of the academic degree, and no one abstained from the vote. Thus, we award the academic degree of candidates of sciences in psychology in specialization 536 clinical psychology to Tatiana Dremina. Tatiana, please, you have the floor for the finalizing remarks. Distinguished chair, distinguished members of the board, Tatiana Dmitrievna, everyone present, I would like to heartily thank you for the help and support that you rendered to me during all this lengthy path. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for the great defense. Congratulations. And congratulations to your thesis supervisor. And I therefore close our board session. I thank everyone for participating, and please turn off the broadcast.